Hey, welcome back, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here with Ryan Gray. We're excited to bring you all the latest news brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. So have our partner First Student sponsoring this week. They're a leader in student transportation solutions, and our friends at Vera Mobility. Guys, had some big changes happen in the industry. We'll be talking with Tim Ammon, who is the new Vice President of General Manager of Passenger Services for Zonar. Some of you might have known Tim Ammon, a familiar name out there. Ryan, we've known Tim a long time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Tim, back in the day, was a member of our editorial board of advisors for School Transportation News. A lot of you folks out there in the nation have seen him at a number of our conferences, especially STN Expo Reno. He was at STN Expo Indianapolis as well. So, it's definitely a familiar name. We worked really closely with him. He's really one of the leading consultants in the transportation industry. And a lot of you will remember he was a part of that STARTS project that NAPT, NASDIPS, and NSTA launched during COVID-19 to try to give folks a realignment plan for opening up operations again when school would go back. So definitely a school bus guy. He knows the business. So it's be interesting to see this next chapter. So as Tim enters into the scene for Zonar, Kevin Mest, who a lot of folks know very well, again, another school bus guy, has really had a long career in the industry. He's retiring, so that's really what's making this possible for Tim to take over as VP and General Manager of that passenger services division over at Zonar. So again, Kevin, was a member of Laidlaw, North American Central School Bus, before he went over to Zonar and led them for the last 8.5 years or so. And heard from him on LinkedIn. Actually, Kevin said he's looking forward to retirement and he's got some travel planned. So he's going to be catching up. Instead of traveling, Tony, to all these school bus shows all over the nation, looks like he's going to get some good R&R. So Kevin has been a valued partner with us as well. So hopefully we'll see you around from time to time.
Yeah, no, he's got some grandchildren as well, Ryan. So that always motivates you as well. Yeah, he's always showing me those pictures. So we wish him well. He's been a great friend of STN, and we wish him all the best in this next chapter of his life. And speaking of next chapters, Ryan, sounds like Bluebird has closed the book with their ex-CEO, Matt Stevenson, and the new CEO, we've got Phil Horlock. That's a familiar name, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Phil just retired. It seemed like, just a little over a year ago, November of 21. And that's when Matt Stevenson came into the picture and definitely brought in a new era of Bluebird. And, certainly we've seen the electric school bus really expand during Matt's tenure. But Matt announced last week that he was leaving for personal reasons. And then those personal reasons came to fruition. We learned the next day when we understood that he was named the new president CEO of Holley, which is basically a aftermarket automotive and truck enthusiast manufacturer and supplier. So, Matt definitely came in. It looked like that coming out of COVID, obviously so many businesses were hit hard. Matt has a track record of coming in and spending a year or two with the company and really helping lean things out. It looks like he did his job. He's moving on. Matt, good luck to you. But like you said, Phil, a familiar name. Retirement didn't last long for him, so he's stepping right back in to the fray, and he's going to be leading the evolution over there at Bluebird.
Yeah, Ryan, I know Bluebird dropped their financial results for 2023 second quarter. We didn't get it on the podcast last week, but they raised guidance for the year. Net sales of $299.8 million with a net income of $7.1 million adjusted for EBITDA and $19.8 million with 2,304 buses sold in fiscal year 23, and that guidance increased to adjust their EBITDA of approximately $60 million with the robust backlog of $775 million plus, and that's nearly 5,800 units on back order. So they definitely turned heads on the street. Their stock price rocketed up, I think about 35 percent plus. And
Mm-hmm.
then all this kind of shakeup happened with them. There was an announcement that there was a unionization of their workforce that came out. There was a vote, and they voted to unionize with the United Steelworkers Association, which that seems to be unusual in the South, from what I was reading.
Absolutely.
It hasn't happened, and then the announcement of Stevenson stepping down and Phil stepping in. That, I think investors, they love good results, but they don't like change. So they definitely responded, and we've seen a little bit of a pullback in the last couple of days. But we'll see. I think the health and well-being of Bluebird looks like really good based on these order numbers that they reported.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that from across the manufacturing base. Back orders are super strong, and we've talked about it. A lot of it's making up for last year with supply chain that really put a wrinkle into production. So I know that we've talked about how basically the orders are filled for the entire year already. I mean, and they have been. We walked into 2023 and we heard from at least one OEM who said, "Hey, we're completely full for the year." So back to the Bluebird angle, like I said, it wasn't a huge surprise that Matt was moving on, but I think what really caught us off guard was Phil. Was the person who is stepping back in. So certainly we'll see what that means to Bluebird. But definitely, like you said, very, very strong financial results for them, where they had been, I don't like to use the word struggling, but it was they were very open and public about the challenges that they faced over the past year or two with COVID and with the supply chain. So it's always great to see manufacturers who are healthy and chugging along.
All right, Ryan, before we get to some more headlines, here's a message from First Student, the nation's leader in student transportation solutions. First Student's approach to transportation provides your district with a local team with a national support network, collaborative planning, and customized services that keep your fleet operational and your students safe. First Student moves more passengers per day than all U.S. airlines combined. Caring for students is their top priority. And as the leader in electrification, they recently reached another major milestone by driving 1 million electric miles. Guys, you can learn more by visiting firststudentinc.com. That's firststudentinc.com. All right, we're back. Excited to talk about some more headlines, Ryan. I know we had some investigations going on, right? Wisconsin, there was something that happened.
Exactly. Yeah. May 12th, a student was killed tragically at her school bus stop, the morning stop right in front of her home or not far from her home, about 50 miles or so northwest of Madison, Wisconsin. Apparently this was another illegal passing incident where an F-150 was traveling behind the school bus. The school bus stopped. This is a state road, pretty rural area, posted speed limit on the 2-lane highway as 55 miles per hour. The truck apparently did not see the school bus in time, whatever happened, tried to stop, was not able to stop in time, swerved, struck the rear right end of the school bus, but then something that we haven't seen before, or at least in a while, the truck then hit the student. So it caromed off and hit the student again. Unfortunately, the student died at the scene. Very tragic out there. She was only 13 years old. And we found out a couple days later, the National Transportation Safety Board, they are investigating. So a lot of folks are used to NTSB investigating what would consider to be, traditional type school bus crashes. But one of the things that NTSB has told me in the past is that they are always looking for different type of crash forces to investigate, things that they have not seen before, so they can really find out what happened. And of course, try to make sure that never happens again. So certainly there is a very big federal focus right now on illegal school bus passing. We've reported on what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is doing that's tied to IIJA, the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed that, of course, gave us the clean school bus, the $5 billion clean school bus program from EPA. But part of that language is directing NHTSA to study illegal passing and study the technology that is out there to try to mitigate or stop it. So NTSB is a sister agency to NHTSA. They are both under the Department of Transportation umbrella, but NTSB is the investigative body, right? So they are, again, looking to find out exactly what happened. They're also going to be looking at some of the technology around illegal passing.
I guess it'll be interesting, Ryan, to see just the equipment as well. Was it a newer bus? Was it an older bus?
It was a 2016 Bluebird. So, not super new, not super old. So ostensibly, and one of the things that we don't know, because we're still waiting to get a lot of details on the investigation, it's going to be a couple more weeks until NTSB's initial investigation is released. And then it'll take a year to 2 years for a final report on it. But the early indications from the sheriff's office, it was not clear if the school bus had its red lights flashing and stop arm engaged. Would like to assume so, but we don't know that for sure. We're still trying to find that out from the authorities there.
Was the driver distracted? Were they on their cell phone? What was the rate of speed, right? There's definitely some stuff that plays into it. If you hit a bus that hard and then the vehicle caroms, they must have been going really fast.
And again, that's what NTSB is going to be studying. They're going to be studying the speed of the truck involved. It looked from the photos that I'd seen that it looked like it was a pretty nice day. So weather shouldn't have been an issue. So yeah, certainly you're always looking at, was it distracted driving? What was it that caused this? But what we do know is that, a little girl lost her life, 13-year-old Evelyn Gurney. She was a hockey player, youth hockey player there in Wisconsin. So our hearts do go out to that community and to the family. It's always a tragedy whenever we see one of these things happen. But like NTSB pointed out to me, Chris Poland, who's the deputy director of their Office of Highway Safety, she referred back to that 2018 triple fatality at that rural school bus crossing in Rochester, Indiana. So, it's certainly, again, this is something at the forefront of NTSB's mind. And, it just happens to be, here we are, a week or so out from STN Expo Indianapolis, Tony, and one of our opening sessions on June 2nd will be a session that looks at, can we get to zero deaths at school bus stops? And we're going to be looking at illegal passing, but we're going to be looking at school bus stop safety in general, how routing plays into that, crossing students, do we cross them? And that's been a big, movement there in Indiana to go away from that. So, certainly there's going to be a lot of lessons learned from this. But again, it is always just heartbreaking that a child has to lose their life for us to learn those lessons.
Yeah, there's technology companies like our sponsor, Vera Mobility, right? They have technology like illegal passing cameras and citation. But again, this is the carrot versus the stick, right? Also, we're talking about lighting. Was illumination an issue, right? So this is always kind of things. There are different products out there that increase the lighting of these vehicles, increase visibility, also the signage on the vehicles. Obviously, this all plays into it. Now, you said it was good weather, I guess time of day.
So apparently, yes. Again, this happened at 7:30 in the morning, so it was the morning route.
Okay, sun's up probably at that point. It's not dusk. It's not too dark.
Yeah, so we're well into springtime. The sun should have been out. Again, we'll get a lot of those details from NTSB. But just judging on the reports that I saw at the time, it seemed like it was a nice day. So certainly there's a lot at play here. They'll also be looking at the school bus drivers' actions. We'll get to the bottom of, did everything go as it should have with the stop arm and the flashing lights. One thing that we've also looked at, and we're going to be talking about this in Indy with this general session, is kind of different states and sometimes even different districts have different requirements for when those yellows go on to start warning motorists of the stop. Sometimes it's 350 feet. Sometimes it's 500 feet. It can depend. So that's what we're going to be discussing. And, certainly I don't know if we're going to solve the issue there with that general session, but definitely getting folks to talk and then, go out there to the trade show a few days later and engage those partners out there and, find out what can be done differently, what can be done better to, protect our children.
Yeah, Ryan. Well, that's a good time to take a little break and hear a message from our partner, Vera Mobility. Guys, if you're concerned about safety for your students at school bus stops, are you struggling to force illegal passing incidents? Vera Mobility Crossing Guard solution can help. Designed specifically for school bus safety, this turnkey solution reduces stop arm running and provides end-to-end support for transportation departments, school officials, and law enforcement. Crossing Guard safety programs are violator funded, so there's no upfront cost to your school district or company. Visit veramobility.com/government to customize your school bus safety package today. That's VERRA mobility.com/government. Let's zero in on safety and keep our kids safe. All right, Ryan, we're back. I'm excited to talk a little more about STN Expo and Green Bus Summit. I know we did have an EPA listening session last week, which was, I think, a recap of what had been already done. But again, people are still learning, gathering information about how to get engaged on the grant. I also participated in a webinar hosted by MGL, which is called Microgrid Labs. And I had Superintendent Blake Vargas from Kearney Valley USD 436 in Kansas. He was talking about this really great electrification project that he was doing and all the factors that played into his decision to move into school bus electrification, and how he went out and got a grant because some of the buses he had were aging out in terms of some of the mandates to get them off the road. So he leveraged that and he's taken order of a couple of electric buses. And what MGL ended up doing for him, which I found interesting because I knew them, but they're really a full service kind of engineering and consulting company. They really did like a deep dive analysis of his fleet, that route analysis. They looked at, what did he need from a transformer, from a utility standpoint, like how big, what was the charging infrastructure that he needed, what was the appropriate thing based on his considerations, because he wanted to maximize his savings. He also was analyzing what manufacturer to buy. He ended up going with IC Bus on those initial buses because Kansas and I guess Tulsa, Oklahoma were only a couple hours away. So it made sense for him to watch a fully integrated EV get built at their Tulsa plant, which was interesting to hear his perspective on. But he really kind of described being eyes wide open and going and driving to another yard 6 hours away to experience an electric bus, but he didn't get nearly the value and the data that he needed before he was introduced to MGL through his public utility, which was called Evergy in that area. So super interesting. If you guys want to check out the webinar, it was a great listen. Learned a lot myself participating in these. It's always really great. We've got a great lineup of different webinars on energy and EPA, and there's just so much information, guys, to soak it up. But STN Expo and Green Bus Summit is like a week away. We're like getting super close. And then we have STN Expo in Reno and Green Bus Summit, which is, we have our deadline coming up for the early bird, which is June 9th.
Coming up soon.
So you can still save $100 to register. Ryan and I have been working so hard with the team. Yep. We're herding cats. Everybody's running hard to get all these things put together. And there's a lot of people. It takes a village, man. It takes an absolute village, Ryan.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, to your point, about that webinar, I see that trend really developing where there's so much more consulting services and on that contractor side too, not school bus contractor, but general contractor, to working with the utilities and looking at the actual construction and what needs to go on and that route analysis and figuring out what kind of bus you need and what kind of charge and, what kind of power. you mentioned IC Bus, and of course they made that announcement we mentioned last week at ACT Expo, where they and International, their sister truck brand, are partnering with Quanta Services on that exact type of relationship, where it's, again, holding the hands of school districts from way before they even buy the bus or get the grant funds for the bus, right? Before they get the infrastructure in place, where they really need to sit down and start drawing up schematics and engaging the engineers. So that's super interesting to me. Speaking of EPA and Reno, if you all haven't registered yet for Reno, like Tony said, you have some time.
Not much time though.
but we have the EPA who's going to be there again talking about the Clean School Bus Program. Of course, we have this open competitive grant right now. Some of the details are still being put together, but this is on the agenda. July 18th, right before the trade show, that opening general session that morning. We're going to have the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. We're going to have the EPA there. Really kind of talking about the program. So in addition to the Green Bus Summit that we have on July 16th, and talking with school districts about kind of what their experiences are from the ones who are just getting their feet wet with electrics, who have been running it for several years. And of course, hearing from all the different suppliers and manufacturers, just a wealth of information waiting for you guys. So yeah, head over to stnexpo.com. And again, get information on Indy. You could still show up and register on site. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, all right, guys, we're going to be going with Taylor Ekbatani is talking to Tim Ammon. But before we get to that, we've got a message from TransFinder. Hey, Ryan, do you remember the dynamic duo Batman and Robin from the old 60s show Bang Boom Pow, right? Well, there's a new dynamic duo on the scene. That's TransFinder's Route Finder Plus and Wayfinder. Route Finder Plus is TransFinder's award-winning industry-leading routing solution, and Wayfinder is the driver app that is changing the way drivers and subs approach their routes. Together, this pair provides the winning combination to help combat your school transportation woes, including driver shortage, inefficiencies, student discipline issues, while helping you improve the driver experience. Route Finder Plus is intuitive, browser-based, and includes route optimization to help you build the most efficient routes possible. Wayfinder, the driver app, provides turn-by-turn instructions and allows users to take attendance and work seamlessly with Plus. You guys can learn more about this dynamic duo by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or giving them a call at 800-373-3609.
All right, guys. So Taylor Ekbatani here. I have an awesome guest on the podcast with us. We have Mr. Tim Ammon. So hello, welcome.
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for having me and being extraordinarily generous with the intro.
Yeah, of course. So it's a funny story. I was preparing for Tim to join us on the podcast today. It stemmed from a conversation we had a couple weeks ago, kind of talking about the June issue and this idea on transitioning to electric school buses and what directors kind of, the questions that they kind of need to be asking. And so we had a great conversation. So I reached out to Tim. I was like, hey, let's bring this to the podcast for our listeners. And then I got an email today. So I was planning on introducing Tim as the Vice President of Business Development for the Center for Effective School Operations. But I'm now going to be introducing Tim as the Vice President and General Manager of Passenger Services for Zonar Systems. So congratulations, Tim, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a super exciting time for me and hopefully for what's coming with Zonar. And it has it's been a whirlwind actually here with all of the transition issues and just trying to make sure we're blocking and tackling on everything correctly and getting everybody taken care of on both sides of the fence. So, but I very much appreciate the announcement and congratulations and particularly all of the goodwill that I've gotten from folks who, have found out about my transition.
Yeah, I mean, we got an email about it today. So we have an article, stnonline.com, and we're going to talk about, it a little later, because I do still want to have our electric school bus conversation. But congratulations. And of course, this is coming off the retirement of Kevin Mest. And he was, I think, with Zonar for about almost 9 years. So
8 or 9 years,
following his retirement.
Yeah. And it's a bit intimidating, actually, right? Grabbing the baton from Kevin, who grabbed it from Don Carnahan, who grabbed it from the founders, and there's a very big both set of shoes and long legacy to live up to, and that's certainly been something that I keep in my thoughts in the wee hours of the morning when I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
That's awesome. So also super exciting that you were actually one of our first podcast guests. I think you were on episode 4. I went back and I searched you. So now.
Yeah. Early, right? I knew I was early. Yeah. It's awesome.
And now we're recording 161.
Yes.
So that's a huge transition there, and also a huge transition with you. So I think it all kind of circles around full force. It's awesome.
It's a very nice karmic universe.
Yes, very much so. All right. So let's jump into it. Let's talk about electric.
Sure.
What are these kind of questions, and this is kind of what I'm looking at for the June article. So that will come out June 1st. But what are these kind of questions that directors should be asking themselves or should be thinking about before they even buy a bus, right?
Yeah, sure. And we have been thinking a lot about this as a result of one of the panels that we'll have put together for the Green Bus Summit, and our conversations around this, thinking about transition for electric, and trying to recognize, I think it's a little bit like trying to keep two completely different thoughts in your head at the same time, which is it's not all that different, except it's really different, right? And the operating components of it and so forth might be similar to what's happening right now in the sort of ICE world once you're up and running. But getting to that point is going to be a significant challenge for folks. And one of the things that we are thinking a lot about is this question of how do I contextualize this for my organization? There's so much information out there around people who are making this transition that one of the concerns that we certainly have come across and have seen with people is assuming that what's happened to everybody else is going to happen to you. And really what we need to think about is what's going to happen in your context, right? And so in my mind, one of the biggest outstanding issues to continue to be addressed is this question of infrastructure. And the infrastructure piece, though, is in 90% of the conversations being talked about as charging stations, right? They're almost being used as synonyms. And I don't think they are, actually. I think the actual infrastructure question is a lot bigger than that. The infrastructure question involves charging stations, but doesn't end there. And that to me is, if folks can get their heads around that to me is an important lesson that can come out of this. Because, depending on where you are, I mean, I live in the state of New Jersey, right? One of the things that happens in the state of New Jersey is we've got a ton of Superfund sites. And what we don't know in some respects is once we put a shovel in the ground, what happens underneath that, right? And do we know that we've got all the permitting processes in place? Do we know that we've got all of the environmental inspections done that we need to have done? Do we know that we're going to be able to have a sufficient footprint to be able to do this? All of these things are infrastructure questions that go well beyond just the charging part of infrastructure, right? And to me, I think demonstrates how important it is for directors to be thinking about this idea of who does my partner have to be while I'm doing this?
Mm-hmm. And I know, the conversation's just kind of been like, buy a bus and buy a charger. And that's not necessarily the case, as you're saying with trenching, directors might not even be able to dig in that part of the land or, not access the ground. And so that's a whole another conversation that they need to be having.
Exactly. And the question then becomes, if you can't, then what? Right. And so again, in my mind, from an infrastructure standpoint, let's say for the sake of argument that you're in what is a fairly typical bus yard, right? Which is a tucked away piece of land that nobody seemed to want at some point in time that now you own and may not be big enough to support all of the infrastructure for the charging stations and the buses and everything else that's going to come with it. The question becomes like, then what, right? Are we going to go out and acquire another piece of ground? Is that going to be, adjacent to or proximal to the current piece that we're on? If not, does that mean we're going to have a doubling of problems around like, what do we have to do with the electric utility? Or does it mean that we're going to look to different answers? Like in our primary lot, we're going to put in, a transformer and we're going to have to wait 18 months from the electric company to be able to do that. But at our satellite lot, we're going to go in and put in a microgrid and we can do that in 12 months. But we can only do, 20% of the number of buses there. Like I think the number of possibilities for folks to think about in all of these things is really significant. And some of the conversations that I've had recently actually have really helped, I think, frame it in a better way than I was previously saying it, which is this idea, that the first couple of buses that you buy are kind of like an experiment. When you get to 20 or 30, you're running an operation. And the problems between 2 and 30 are very different. And so if your thoughts as a director or as a district or as whomever you are as a company is that we're going to scale this thing up to some significant number, you've really got to be thinking about those problems at 30 before you get to 1. And that means you've got to be way out in front of it. And so that, I think, is an underappreciated aspect of this whole transition so far. It certainly was for me until I got a little bit deeper into thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of something that I, unveiled as I was reporting on this for the June issue, is that regardless of, how many buses you're purchasing right now or you're planning on applying for right now, once you're doing this initial planning process, you need to be thinking about the future, because It's not just, getting one bus anymore. It's looking at this, how can we future-proof our operation for as many electric buses as we need or as we want, as a school district or as a company.
I think that's exactly right. And the other part that becomes an element in this is, how do we not chase the obsolescence curve, right? How do we think about what we're putting in isn't going to be obsolete by the time we're able to actually acquire it and install it? Right. So this is an area of the industry, right? And school busing is so frequently seen as this like relatively sleepy, staid, non-dynamic kind of environment. But this stuff is like a rocket ship. And so the amount of change and the pace of change is so significant within the technologies that you really do have to be thinking about like tomorrow before today starts, and try to be out in front of this because of all of the dependencies, from the standpoint of potentially having to put, transformers in. Right now, just getting construction done is no picnic, right? Because we're still, chasing very high costs on some of those kind of things. So the way that you're building budgets to try to do this is changing almost hourly, right? I mean, there are a huge number of details for folks to be trying to keep track of. And if at the same time you also have to go out and cover a route every day, this gets to be a really big problem really fast. And one that I think more and more that I look into it, the more and more I think you have to build a community around yourself to be able to successfully accomplish this. And that community is going to include peers, it's going to include partners, it's going to include vendors, it's going to include random people that you don't really know but have some insightful thing to say about how to do this, right? All of that build out of who's your community to figure out what your problem is, I think is one of the most important things that directors can try to do as they're working through these problems.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting to me is, I came to STN, in 2019, right? So it was right as electric was getting in its popularity. So I've seen and written about electric, basically my career here at STM. But for directors or, people who have been in the industry like yourself for 20 plus years, this change is happening quicker, I think, for them, because it's like, it's been diesel, it's been gasoline, and now it's flip of the switch, it's electric.
Right. Yeah. And this is Tim's opinion only, so no one else is accountable for this, right? But Tim's opinion only on this whole thing is it's impossible to ignore the influence of $5 billion, right? It's impossible to underestimate the impact that the subsidies currently are having on the pace of change. And I think for longtime participants in the industry, nothing else is compared to that. Even when we started talking about alternative fuels, with the late 90s, when I first started getting into some of these things and there were subsidies and grant programs, they weren't nearly as extensive as this. And so, the degree to which those things are influencing behavior, probably for good and probably for bad in some instances, right? Like, we're going to sort all that out later on, I think. But when we sort of look back at what the results of this are, but I think it's incredibly important, the fundamental point that you made, which is this is really happening fast. And so as an organization, you've got to stand up your infrastructure internally, organizational infrastructure, to figure out how to respond to it, right? Because I think, you get sort of three possible responses, I suppose, right? One is we're all in and we're going to go do this. The other one is I'm going to buy as many diesel buses as I possibly can and let this be somebody else's problem, and then there's some very large swath of the middle where we're going to experiment and play with this and see what happens. But I think the compression on the time with which you're going to have to make that decision is unlike anything, certainly, that I've seen since I've been in the industry.
I'm going to throw it back to one of Tim Ammon's famous quotes that I've used over the years.
Oh boy, nice. These usually come back to haunt me.
But you sat on the START task force, and it was a combination of the National School Transportation Organizations, and it was created in response to COVID-19. And I remember you said something, and I've used it like so many times since, but you said it was, a national problem with local solutions. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that same kind of concept could be applied to electric. Maybe not necessarily national problems, maybe national challenges, but I think it could, maybe carry over a little bit.
Oh, I think you're 100% right? That whoever said that quote is brilliant. But no, I do. I think you just have to look at what's happening in like New York and California compared to Wyoming, right? And see how it will be very different depending on where you are. Right. This idea that we're going to, in New York, be, sort of through the electrification process by 2035, I don't think I'm going to be that much older in 2035. Right. Like, it doesn't feel that way. And so that's going to have to happen really fast, which assumes a massive number of things coming together to be able to support it. Mm-hmm. Right. And then we're going to have other parts of the country where it's going to go a lot slower. And it's going to go a lot slower for a huge variety of reasons, some of which are going to be related to funding, some are going to be related to philosophy, and some are just going to be related to capacity. And the organizational capacity to absorb this kind of a massive change. And I think that national concern and local resolution is going to provide some interesting natural experiments for people to learn from. And I know for sure that STN will cover it, and I know for sure that STN will get that out to people. And to me, staying informed of those things from a director standpoint is there's almost no other imperative that's bigger than that at the moment. Other than maybe resolving the driver shortage, but that feels like a moonshot as well. So,
Yeah. And you mentioned, at the beginning of our conversation that you were going to be in Indy. So that's STN Expo Indy for the Green Bus Summit. And Zonar actually has a presentation there during the Green Bus Summit. Can you give us a little teaser on what that conversation is going to be about?
I'd love to. Yeah, it very much is along this kind of conversation line. So we're really fortunate to have a group of folks from Highland, from First Student, from Zonar, talking about this roadmap for electrification journey and really building off some of the experience that those organizations have had working with customers really directly and really closely on not only the planning, but the execution of the plan around electrification for folks. And I think the attendees are going to have a huge potential benefit to come sit through this and to hear how these organizations have been able to guide themselves through the process, but also just to hear where were the roadblocks, right? Where were the successes? Where were things more difficult than expected? And as importantly, where were things less difficult than expected? Mm-hmm. And so we hope to cover all of that in the hour that we're all together on the stage.
It'll go by quick.
Yeah.
That hour.
There's a lot to cover. Yeah.
No, well, we're looking forward to it. So by the time people are listening to this, hopefully they're packing their bags and, getting ready to go to Indy.
Right. Get on the plane. Get to Indy.
Yeah. We want to see you guys all there.
That's right.
But kind of wrapping up here, Tim, I know you're a busy guy now. As you transition to this, new role with Zonar, what can the listeners expect? Do you have any goals? Can you spill the tea on what's up and coming?
Yeah. So my goal is to continue to ensure that Zonar is and remains what it is, which is the leading provider of fleet management and telematics information to this industry. For 20 plus years, I've watched the organization as both an outsider and as a partner in some instances, and seen the commitment to safety and seen the commitment to the industry and seen the commitment to innovation. And I just hope to be a positive and beneficial cog in that machine as we keep building out products and we keep building out services that allow people who are doing unbelievably noble work trying to ensure kids access to education, right? Our goal is to make sure that those folks have the information and tools they need to continue to do that as well as they possibly can. And I'm really confident and really thankful to be part of the Zonar team that's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward, to seeing how Zonar continues to excel, under your leadership.
Yeah, I'm excited.
But is this the exclusive interview, since the news was released today? Is this?
I think it might be. Yeah.
STN got the exclusive.
Yeah, there you go. Right. It is. Right. Exactly. It's fantastic.
That's perfect timing. Honestly, perfect timing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great.
I just want to thank you so much again, Tim, for jumping on with us, and congratulations on your new role. And, we'll all see you in Indy.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. And as always, thanks to all the folks at STN who have been so incredibly supportive of me and incredibly supportive of the organizations that I've worked with since episode 4, at least, but certainly well before that.
A special thanks to Mr. Tim Ammon. All the best to Mr. Kevin Messon in retirement. Ryan Gray, Taylor, thanks guys for being here with us. Always breaking down the latest interviews, headlines. Love getting the latest and greatest in school transportation. Special thanks to our episode sponsors, TransFinder, First Student, and Vera Mobility. Appreciate you guys. STNonline.com for all the latest and greatest on everything happening in the school transportation industry. Guys, again, we mentioned it. STNexpo.com. Make sure you check out Reno Green Bus Summit June 9th. Save that $100 for the early bird special. You can lock it in. Go to STNexpo.com, click on that Reno tab, and we'll see you there for lots of great information, networking classes, director summit. I mean, there's just so much there to dive into. Guys, remember you can subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Make sure and tell your friends too. Don't keep us a secret. Get it out there. Share it. We love you, nation. We'll see you next week.